Welcome to War on the Mind. I'm Scott, your host, the voice in the ether, coming to you from the city of Glasgow. This show is aimed at those who have been doing their own research. In this episode, I'm trying to analyse a piece of spin that came out of the Telegraph newspaper. Okay, the European Union always was a CIA project, as Brexiteers discover. And this article is by Ambrose Evans Pritchard and it is dated the 27th of April 2016, and this came out of the Telegraph. And we see a picture of Jean Monnet, and there's a bit of text below that says EU creator Jean Monnet was Roosevelt's eyes and ears in Europe. Some called him a US agent. So Jean Monnet, in this article, he's called the founding father of a united Europe. Although he only was an economist and a diplomat, so there's obviously bigger powers at work way above him. He's a small cog in a very big machine. So the first paragraph, it says Brexiteers should have been prepared for the shattering intervention of the US. The European Union always was an American project. So the Telegraph, an intellectual broadsheet newspaper that you can trust, and excuse my sarcasm. Anyway, straight away the writer is dragging us to a desired conclusion. Namely, it's all America's fault. Could there be more to this story, or is the Telegraph giving us all the info we need? It's funny, the Telegraph has been the vanguard on being critical of the EU since at least the 1980s, where all other UK mainstream media outlets have been completely silent on the subject. This tells us all we need to know about mainstream media. So the Telegraph is basically dropping a bombshell on the public, and this article also was promoted on MSN Headline News. So why is the Telegraph covering this stuff now? Well, obviously it's the right time to do so. It's the right time to blame America. And paragraph 2 says, it was Washington that drove European integration in the late 1940s and funded it covertly under the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson and Nixon administrations. But this goes way above politics. Politics is just a sideshow. This article is not giving the reader the full story. It's definitely giving a fraction of the story, promoting the idea that it's all down to America and nobody else is involved. Right, so third paragraph says, while irritated at times, the US has relied on the EU ever since as the anchor to American regional interests alongside NATO. And that's pretty much drivel. And the fourth line says there has never been a divide and rule strategy. And this is quite an odd sentence. Paragraph 5 says the Eurosceptic camp has been strangely blind to this, somehow supposing that powerful forces across the Atlantic are egging on British secession and will hail them as liberators. Well, I'm sure the majority of the American public think that the EU is a bad idea too. After all, the EU is non-democratic. Though America is going down the same path as the United Europe, with its North American Union. It's funny, I remember I used to think back in the 1990s that it was strange that there was never a documentary on TV in the 80s or 90s about the European Union. It was complete silence for decades. But I suppose you need complete silence if you're bringing in a brand new governmental system by stealth. But it's good to see the writer has a good sense of humour. Okay, the next paragraph, number 6, says the anti-Brussels movement in France, and to a lesser extent in Italy and Germany, and among the Nordic left, works from the opposite premise that the EU is essentially an instrument of Anglo-Saxon power and capitalisme sauvage. I mean, certainly the main headquarters is located in an Anglo-Saxon area, but we don't really know where these people originally came from. I always think it's better to think that these people are a sort of international network or international brotherhood, so to speak. I was just thinking there's a great line in that movie, V for Vendetta, where the news anchor on TV says something like, why should we help these Americans? Yeah, it's a good example of predictive programming. Paragraph 7. Frances Marine Le Pen is trenchantly anti-American. She rails against dollar supremacy. Her Front National relies on funding from Russian banks linked to Vladimir Putin. In some ways, I think this article is so badly written that most people will probably dismiss the whole article as nonsense. But that's what counterintelligence is all about. The article is getting close to truth, but it's also twisting it a lot. So line 8 says, like it or not, this is at least is strategically coherent. Yeah, this is really badly written. Paragraph 9. The Schuman Declaration that set the tone of Franco-German reconciliation and would lead by stages to the European Community was cooked up by the US Secretary of State Dean Acheson at a meeting in Foggy Bottom. Is that Foggy Bottom or Soggy Bottom? It all began in Washington, says Robert Schuman's Chief of Staff. Yeah, so that paragraph says, so it all began in Washington. Strangely, that line makes me laugh every time I read it. But yeah, this is a real mind-bender for the public. All these people that you see in this article are just frontmen for much bigger powers. But yeah, that's the purpose of mainstream news. To tell you all you need to know to shape your opinion to a desired conclusion. It's the right time to do this, obviously. It also reminds me of George Orwell's 1984, where you have the 3 blocks: Oceania, Eurasia and East Asia. So obviously George Orwell knew where it was all heading, with the America's bloc, the European bloc and the Pacific Rim bloc. It's like that line in the book where They say, who are we at war with today? So yeah, it's all divide and conquer upon the public's mind. Paragraph 10 says, it was the Truman administration that browbeat the French to reach a modus vivendi with Germany in the early post-war years, even threatening to cut off US martial aid. At a furious meeting with recalcitrant French leaders, they resisted in September 1950. So yeah, this is just more drama for the reader. And then we've got a picture of a tank moving into Prague. It's got a wee sentence below that says Soviet tanks rumble into Prague. And then we're on to paragraph 11. Truman's motive was obvious. The Yalta settlement with the Soviet Union was breaking down. He wanted a united front to deter the Kremlin from further aggrandizement after Stalin gobbled up Czechoslovakia, doubtless so as communist North Korea crossed the 38th parallel and invaded the south. But if you really want to get into the meat and potatoes of this, the American involvement is nothing more than an offshoot in all of this. They're not the source, and they never were the source. They're just a branch on the tree. And empires always have their fronts, and they always have their patsy, while the real establishment are located elsewhere. And the ironic thing about this is America will be submerged into the system when their work is done. It's like the CFR came out openly saying that they drafted up the integration of Mexico, America and Canada. So America is on the same path as everyone else, whether they like it or not. Okay, on to paragraph 12. For British Eurosceptics, Jean Monnet looms large in the Federalist pantheon, the eminence grise of supranational villainy. Few are aware that he spent much of his life in America and served as wartime eyes and ears of Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, so this is more comical stuff. After all, Jean Monnet was just another frontman. General Charles de Gaulle thought him as an American agent, as indeed he was in a loose sense. Eric Russo's biography of Monnet reveals how he worked hand in glove with successive administrations. And then we've got a picture of General Charles de Gaulle, and there's a picture, there's a bit of text below that says General Charles de Gaulle was always deeply suspicious of American motives. Paragraph 14. It is odd that this magisterial 1,000-page study has never been translated into English, since it is the best work ever written about the origins of the EU. Well, I can't really comment on that because it's in French. But we'll take your word for it. Paragraph 15. Nor are many aware of declassified documents from the State Department archives showing that US intelligence funded the European movement secretly for decades and worked aggressively behind the scenes to push Britain into the project. There's a bit of a mixed message, but it's definitely getting closer to the truth. There's no doubt that there was American foundations involved in pushing the European movement, but they're not the only ones involved. There was other foundations involved in this. We're talking about both American and Western foundations involved in pushing for a European bloc. And if you've ever read Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope and the Anglo-American Establishment, then you know what I'm talking about. Also, check out Alan Watt. He's done great work in explaining the international cabal. So the next one is paragraph 16. As this newspaper first reported when the treasure became available, one memorandum dated July 26, 1950 reveals a campaign to promote a full-fledged European Parliament that is signed by General William J. Donovan, head of the American Wartime Office of Strategic Services, precursor of the Central Intelligence Agency. So yeah, this makes sense. After all, the CIA have been directly connected to the Western banking cabal since day one. And a good book to read is The Cultural Cold War by Francis Stoner Saunders, which goes into good depth in the CIA. And this is all declassified documentation showing that the CIA have been involved in controlling cultural, basically controlling culture globally, and it shows you the bankers who channeled the money into these activities. So it's definitely worth getting a hold of. Okay, paragraph 17. The key CIA front was the American Committee for a United Europe, in brackets, ACUE, close brackets, chaired by Donovan. Another document shows that it provided 53.5% of the European movement's funds in 1958. The board included Walter Bedell Smith and Alan Dulles, CIA directors in the 50s, and a cast of ex-OSS officials who moved in and out of the CIA. Well, I mean, that makes perfect sense because, Alan Dulles, he would have to be in there somewhere. After all, he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and was a big player in all this. And we've got a picture of Bill Donovan at his desk. And a bit of text says, Bill Donovan, legendary head of the wartime OSS, was later in charge of orchestrating the EU project. So we're on to paragraph 18. Papers show that it treated some of the EU's founding fathers as hired hands and actively prevented them finding alternative funding that would have broken reliance on Washington. Okay, yeah. I like how they call them the founding fathers. It definitely makes them sound all fuzzy and warm, like Thomas Jefferson or something. Paragraph 19. There is nothing particularly wicked about this. The US acted astutely in the context of the Cold War. The political reconstruction of Europe was a roaring success. And if you know anything about, if you've done your research into this, then you know that's a lot of baloney. when you look into the Rees Commission, or the Rees Committee, and there was a good book done called Foundations. Then you know that one of the foundations talked to Norman Dodds, and the foundation basically, this was an American foundation, basically told Norman Dodds that their mission was to merge the Soviet Union with the Western system into the third way. So the writer is showing that there was a long-term agenda to unite Europe through stealth, which is true. But the article twists the truth and spins it off completely. But it's amazing what you can achieve through a mission of information. But it's all about blaming America, and it's the right time to do it. Especially now that we're moving towards 3 main trading blocks. We are good over here and they're bad over there. Anyway, the rest of the article is just soap opera drama for the reader to get lost in. So I'll skip the rest of the article and let you check it out if you want to. I hope you get something out of this episode, and thanks for listening. And hopefully I can get another episode done soon. So bye for now.